For a few moments, I would like to talk to you about what it means to remove kingdom obstacles. Because there are things that get in our way as we're trying to advance a kingdom mindset as visionary leaders. First thing I'd like to talk to you about is what I call broken systems. Many churches function in the context of broken systems. They've become something over the years that God never intended them to be. God did not lead in this direction, yet we see these things taking place time and time again with things that are really not kingdom focused at all, just taking over the life of the church and really squeezing the life out of the church. I think churches that learn to function in this way have come to this mindset as if they have arrived, as if they don't need anything else, as if they've gotten all of God there is to get, as if they've come to this great place of revelation and they just sort of go through the motions or circle the wagons, if you will, once they get there. Going through the motions week after week and settling for the mundane tasks that come with just finishing the traditions of the year or the common things that we do throughout the church year is not the call of Christ. When we refuse to face the reality that no congregation has arrived and that things, don't have to be the way they've always been, when we refuse to face that reality and expand on our efforts to reach more people, more real lives, and become more of an effective, dynamic presence in the community, we really fail God and His kingdom. You see, one of the main reasons churches are stuck is because their systems and their strategies are broken. And in essence, they've forsaken the mission, to speak very plainly. Churches that continue to use the same systems year after year, month after month, week after week, yet hope for different results, have really lost their way. You see, the only way to get different results is to employ a different system, a different way of thinking about ministry, a different way of thinking about the church, a different way of thinking about the kingdom. Unfortunately, many churches and denominations would rather stay stuck in the place where they feel comfortable. You see, they don't need any added pressure in their life. And oftentimes we would rather stay in comfortable places than to apply the changes that might make people in our congregations and leaders feel very uncomfortable by pushing them out of their places of comfort. And in my experience, that is always the way of the kingdom. The way of the kingdom is never comfort. There's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And we need to continually work on our systems and our strategies in always employing something new, led by the Spirit of God, in an attempt to reach the world for the cause of Christ. And we need to make sure that our systems and strategies align with the kingdom. Because ministry, effective ministry, is a process that is always changing. It's not a product that we ever complete or master. It's always changing. And you as a visionary leader need to understand that. So that's a little bit about the broken systems in the church and this idea of doing the same thing, circling the wagons year in and year out. Now I want to take a moment and talk to you about personal preferences, because personal preferences are a very real problem in ministry and often hinders the advancing of the kingdom. You see, we need to understand it's not about any one person. I think we say we know that, but a lot of times we'll find ourselves catering to certain personalities. Unfortunately, many people in your congregations are going to be of this mindset that it is about them. It's about their taste. It's about their preferences. And if they give the most money, then you should surely cater. If they're involved to a greater degree than someone else, you should surely cater to that. From music to carpet color to assigned seating. I've preached in a lot of churches over the years, and it amazes me how so many of them look like a time warp from 1950. What happens is that often congregations are stuck with an infrastructure that was developed in the 50s or 60s. And as the congregation has dwindled over the year, it has become harder and harder to keep the ministry vibrant when there hasn't been any intentional attempt to reach into the community. We've just sit around and waited on people to come to us. And when it hasn't happened, we find ourselves sitting around scratching our head wondering why. Now, at one of my previous pastorates, oh, I love this guy. One of the patriarchal leaders of the church said to me one time, Pastor, there comes a time when I have to relinquish my personal preferences and allow the next generation to take the wheel. You see, that's one guy in his 80s that understood what it meant to be missional. He understood what it meant to see the larger vision of God for the community. Now, at another assignment, I had a congregant tell the story of moving to a new location, and several of the senior members sitting near the front singing after they had got into this new building and into this new neighborhood and had become a very exciting presence in that neighborhood. Now listen, these are senior citizens sitting near the front singing these new praise choruses, which they didn't care for. But they turned to a visitor and they said, "Isn't this great?" And the guy said, "What, you mean you really like the new music?" And they responded, "No, we don't care for the music at all, but we love all the new people that we're reaching in this neighborhood." The point made, it's not about personal preference. It's not about that. In fact, personal preference is choking the life and the power out of a lot of our churches. God help us to be visionary leaders that help people move past that. I'd like to talk to you also about something else that has baffled me over the years in the context of church. And is this idea that everything new is bad, or new is evil, is what I like to call it. Pastors often encounter the idea that anything that's new or on the horizon or anything they're trying to implement that doesn't kind of fit the wheel, it's not a good thing. And I like to remind people that we serve a God who makes all things new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. The Bible is a story of God continually doing new things. So why do so many churches get stuck with this idea that new is bad or new is evil? The church with this mindset sees everything not contained inside the four walls of the institution as ungodly. It becomes a subtle form of fundamentalism if we're not careful, and creates an us versus them mentality, an us on the inside being godly and right versus those on the outside being the bad guys. That is a Pharisaical mindset. And this approach causes members to focus more on memorials than on people, more on the past than on the future. Now, when I enter a church that has memorial plaques covering the wall and covering their furniture, I immediately recognize that this is a congregation that places a greater emphasis on the past than they do the future. It reminds me of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. God led them with a cloud of fire, a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And when God moved, they packed up and they moved or they got left behind. Now, unfortunately, for many congregations, the Shekinah glory has moved on. Yet they've remained in the wilderness. They've celebrated the good old days until they don't feel like celebrating anymore. And they have failed to recognize that today is the day of the Lord. And when we don't embrace the new thing that God is doing, we get left behind. I'd like to also talk to you about something I call the cloning process. When I was a teenager, I invited a lot of my friends from high school to church with me. Friends that didn't look like the good holiness people that I grew up with there in the Church of the Nazarene. Oftentimes, friends would spend the night at my house on Saturday night and then go to church with me and my family on Sunday morning. I had a couple of friends that had long hair and tattoos before they should have had them, and even some friends with big gauges in their ears and all kinds of blue hair and different colored hair, and they just didn't fit in, is the point. And that church did a terrible job at reaching those folks. Terrible job. Matter of fact, they didn't make any impression on them at all, except a bad impression. These were guys who came to church gatherings on many occasions, yet most of the time only expressed how uncomfortable they felt while they were there because they didn't feel like they fit in. I remember in the 80s a pastor giving me a book to read, and the book had a picture inside it called The Model Church Member. And I remember scratching my head as I looked at this and thinking, surely this isn't right. It was a man in a suit and tie with a perfect smile on his face and his Bible tucked neatly under his arm, and his hair was combed perfect, and he had this perfect family with him. And it was giving this illusion that that was the model church member. Many churches seem to develop the notion that we must clone our members. In other words, everybody needs to look alike and act alike, and that perfection is the goal. What I want to know is where we ever came up with that idea. Certainly not from the Bible. What I think we've got to do is we've got to diversify our thinking if we're going to make disciples of all people. So friends, we've got to get out of the cloning business. Finally, I want to leave you with this. When there's no vision, you all know, the people perish. I love the way the Message translates Proverbs 29:18. If people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves, but when they attend to what he reveals, they are most blessed. In other words, if a congregation is not continually identifying what God is revealing, they will die. It's a simple idea, but it's an important idea. That where there is no guiding vision, no sense of true north, no sense of where you're going, what you should be engaging, no direction in terms of where you need to go, no real leading of God, no real sensing of God's presence, then you have nothing to keep you on course. And when that happens, people cast off restraint. Anything goes. Time is spent without direction and without discretion. Churches who have lots of vision in the beginning have none when they get to that place. They spend their days, but they don't invest their time. So friends, we need vision, and not just any vision. We need God's vision for his kingdom to be deeply rooted in the life of the church, because with God, all things are possible.